Mhm.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's check if presentation works.
if we are ready. If we are ready on YouTube. So hi again. Hi. If you haven't watched the first stream of preparation, I guess, for this year's Game Jam. I'm Richard Ricardas. I keep forgetting to to introduce myself. I'm from the Lithuanian Game Developers Association, and yeah, we're organizers of Game Jam. Already for 10 years. I mean, this is kind of also last year we had like a 20 years anniversary of Game Jams in Lithuania, and this year we also have like a celebration of 10
I'm from
years
the Lithuanian Game
of
Developers
association,
and the association
and
organizing
yeah, we
10th
10th Game Jam, and this year the idea is to have several lectures online each evening before the Game Jam starts, to kind of talk about different things, and which could help, different topics which could help to prepare for Game Jam, to kind of better imagine how everything works, and how you can be a bit more effective. You can ask questions here on Discord or on YouTube. I think it's we have a chat open there. And yesterday's you can find also yesterday's recording. We had like an intro in general about Game Jam, and several participants of earlier Game Jams shared their tips, their advice, experience from their participation. So yeah, I think that would be interesting to watch. And today we are joined by Andrea from Nordcurrent. Andrea, please turn on sound and vision.
Hi, hello everybody.
So yeah, great to see you, and thanks a lot for joining, for sharing this topic. The topic is about concept of fun in video games. So yeah, and I know that you did like a lot of research about it, and to talk about this topic. So yeah, please welcome, and share your screen, and let's watch. And I'll keep in background, and later if there will be some questions, I will ask you.
Absolutely. As Richard already said, thank you for the introduction. Today we're talking about where does the fun in video games come from, and we will see it's a kind of a spiky question. So we will start from an easier one. I will start from an easier question. What is a game? Well, a game is something you play with, obviously. However, you do play with a toy train, and you do play with chess. Now, those two kind of entertainment share two differences. The first one is that chess has rules, and I have to move pieces on the grid. I have to follow turns. I capture in a certain way. And the second important difference is that chess has an outcome. So the most important rule of chess is checkmate, which determines which of the players wins. So those are two defining traits of games when compared to toys. But it's not enough yet. And fortunately, we're not the first people who try to define what a game is, and many before us have tried. Game is a rule-based formal system with a variable and quantifiable outcome. The player exerts effort in order to influence the outcome. Those are the words of Jasper Joel in The Player, the Game, and the World. The game is a system defined by rules that results in a quantifiable outcome. Katie Salen and Eric Zimmerman in The Rules of Play. All games share four defining traits: a goal, rules, a feedback system, and voluntarily participation. Jill McGonigal, reality is broken. So a game is, with an extremely simplified view, something you play with, following an objective and observing a set of rules. Now, rules. Rules are called in-game mechanics, and I want to make a quick stop on this argument, as I heard the term mechanics being used to refer to almost anything when talking about games. And for this, we are referring to the MDA framework, which is a paper which was created to try and provide an analytical approach to analyzing games. In this case, games called the artifacts are defined by mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics, and mechanics in this system are defined as the various actions, behaviors, and control mechanisms afforded to the player. So for instance, shuffling is a mechanic, a single rule of the game. Now this paper could take talk of its own, but we're trying to keep things light. So yes, a mechanic is a single rule. Now that the premises are done, on to the main topic of the talk. It's taken from this book, Material Fun, wrote by Ralph Koester, and he worked on games like Star Wars Galaxies and Ultima Online. He starts from what the human brain is, for what we are. We are machines that defy entropy, and we evolved to survive, to keep defining entropy. And to do so, we need energy to move, energy to keep our body temperature. And the best way to have the more energy for us is to use the less energy possible when going on with our lives. And considering that despite its size, the brain is one of the organs that consumes the most energy that we get from food, we develop various tricks to help us use less energy while using our brain. Our tricks include cognitive biases like anchoring, like the status quo bias, like cherry picking, and all other sorts of biases which also could take a talk of their own, and chunking. Those are the words of the author on chunking. We rarely look at the real world. We instead recognize something we have chunked and leave it at that. Chunking is a process. It's a process of subdividing and storing the information, motor sequences, processes, basically anything that can be simplified by our brains can be chunked. And it is done by getting rid of the noise on repeating the same task or the same process over and over again. So for instance, I get hired for a new position and I have to make my way to work for the first time. I probably will have to look up directions the first time. Well, the second time I will probably remember by heart. And by repeating it over and over again, I won't need to think about those directions anymore, and it will just happen as I think about my own hassles, perhaps what is waiting for me at work, perhaps the argument I just had before leaving the house, or the series I watched last night in streaming. And so it allows us to go on autopilot. Let's make a more extensive example. Let's say we want to chunk jazz, a music genre. We as 21st century people are accustomed to pop music. So with supertonics in the chorus, with usually just one key change, if any, in the B part of the AAB structure, and generally simple chords. However, jazz is a more complicated genre to get into, as it has unusual tempo. Rather than using a fourth structure, it goes on seventh, fourth, and similar tempos. It has more complex chords which add or take different sounds from what I'm used to hear, and it has numerous changes of keys throughout the song. So let's say I put my headphones in and I start listening to a jazz song without having ever listened to jazz before. The first time will be atrocious, almost. The tempo will not do as I expected to do. The chords are way too complicated for me to catch all of the sounds that they are providing me, and the key changes almost randomly for what I understand. However, I'm determined, and so I listen to another song, and then 3 songs, and then a whole album, etc., etc. And as I listen more and more to jazz, I will start to pick up on various characteristics, like the tempo. Probably would be the first thing that comes natural to me to understand. Then I will start recognizing maybe the chords. I will start anticipating the changes of key throughout the song. And maybe I will even get to the point where I recognize subconsciously notes, successions, like the Devil's Triton. And so now that all of those pieces go into place, I can say I've chunked jazz and I can comfortably listen to it. However, there is still a long way before grokking jazz. Grokking is a neologism used for the first time in this novel, Stranger in a Strange Land. And it's a word that the aliens of Mars use to, well, it actually has a lot of meanings. It means to love, to fear, to hate, to drink, to eat. Most importantly, it means to understand. It means to understand something intuitively, by empathy. It means to understand something extremely deeply. It means to understand something so good, I start to blend with the thing I'm understanding, and that thing starts to blend with me. It acts at a much deeper level than chunking, and it's responsible for things like common sense, like instinct, like muscle memory, which, to be fair, is not really the memory of the muscles. And it creates hard-coded behaviors in our brain. For instance, let's think about driving. If someone drives a stick car, they will know that when the car in front of them brakes and they brake to not to hit it, they have to press the clutch so that the car doesn't stop. And if in the first months of driving it can be harder to manage the clutch, and it becomes more and more comfortable as one becomes more proficient with driving, after years and years of driving, one is so deep into it that using the clutch becomes not just automatic, but a thing that is almost tied to the driving itself. Our body just presses the clutch automatically without us thinking about it or without even noticing it. And that's pretty much how grokking goes. Now, this is all fine and dandy, but we're here about games after all. So we like games for 2 main reasons. The first one is that they are easy to chunk, as they are representations of reality and not actually reality. As we don't have to strip them of so much information to get to what we need to chunk, because they are designed in a way that helps us doing it. So for instance, level designers will try to lead our eyes towards the right exit, and gameplay items will be handily color-coded to what they need to do exactly. And the second reason why we like games is that to chunk and to grok, we need to repeat actions and movements. And games are a safe environment to do so. So for instance, if you're in a burning house in your life, you have one shot at getting it right. Whereas if you are in a burning house in a video game, you can try as many times as you want to try and perfect that jump or that action in which you need to avoid flames, for instance. And from junking to grokking. Those are the words of Bryce Morrison, game designer at Warner Bros. Games, and he was published on Game Developer, formerly Gamasutra. Grok, a verb, is when a player has completely mastered a design. They get it, they understand it, they know it intimately, backwards and forwards. Understand how the early part of the design works, how it is working now as they're experiencing it, and they also really know how it's going to play out in the future. They can manipulate the game to their will and face and overcome all challenges around the skill. Have grokked. So what does it mean to actually grok a mechanic in games? Let's start from something simple. Let's start from swinging a sword. In this exact case, Zelda 1986, you press the button and Link thrusts the sword forward. It's an easy to understand action mechanic. However, there's plenty to be chunked and to be grokked as we repeat this action more and more, like anticipation frames, range, hit frames, and recovery frames. Are all characteristics that are not explained to a tutorial, but that the player learns to take into consideration as they do more and more fights. And whereas I need to think about those parameters when I first start to fight monsters, at later levels, at later stages, will be able to just let my subconscious handle those calculations, let's call them that, and think more about positioning, about which enemies have the priority, about, in other games, stamina, mana, cooldown abilities, and whatever else I need to take into consideration. Another pretty simple mechanic to understand right away is reloading, and hit a button, the magazine will be refilled. However, also here there's a lot to understand. Obviously, different weapons will have different reload time, and I have to keep this into consideration if I don't want to be caught off guard when I turn a corner. What happens if I reload the weapon with an empty magazine or with a half full one? Does it change something? Or what about if I change weapon during the animation? Those are all things that are not explained through a tutorial, but the player finds out with the experimentation with the mechanic. And for mechanics to dynamics, let's say we are playing League of Legends, and I am say, very good Zed player. Zed is an assassin and is usually played mid lane. So let's say I'm a very good assassin player and I switch play to a mage because I want to try something new. Even though I won't be as good a mage player I am with that assassin I usually play, I will still retain all skills from mid laning. So I will know how to farm properly, I will know about wave management, when to freeze, when to push, when to shove. I know about matchups. I know that if I have an early game champion against, I have to play it safe early and punish it later. And I know about enemy ganks, when to expect them, and how to roam effectively. Another example of this can be a support role in any shooter hero game like Overwatch, for instance. Even though I might not be as proficient with the new support I'm trying out now, I will still be able to retain the information that I grokked and chunked from early supports I played. So for instance, I know that I have to stay in the backline because if the enemy has a chance to kill me, I will be the first target they will go against. I know that the tank is the front line needs to be healed so that it doesn't die too soon. And I know that DPSs need to be buffed as they need to secure kills either on other DPSs or better on enemy supports. And this goes up to whole genre of games. Let's say I'm a fan of first-person shooters and I'm trying a new one out. Even though I won't be proficient with the weapon meta or with the exact layout of the maps, I will still have a basic understanding of the control scheme. I will know which weapon is better in which occasion, and I know that most of first-person shooters maps are built around the 3 lanes structure, and I will then have a more or less clear idea of where the enemy players are positioning themselves on those maps. And a similar reasoning can be done for strategy games. Let's say I'm a very good Stellaris player and I'm trying out a new one like Endless Legends. And even though I won't be sure on the meta, so I won't know which buildings are the best, which civilizations do what, I still know that I need to think in advance, many turns in advance. I still know that resource management is a very important player in the strategy to win, and that to win, I basically win to explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. So, to sum up what has been said so far, fun is one of the many chemical reactions in the brain which create pleasure. So, for instance, eating chocolate has an high energy intake and thus it creates pleasures for us. An orgasm is needed for us to reproduce, so it produces pleasure. Grokking lets us use less energy when facing the same challenges, the same situations, and leads to also a shorter response time. So in a sentence, fun in video games is a physiological response triggered by the learning process. Now, I know what you might be thinking. When I think of fun, I think of something like this. I think of people chatting, chilling, talking, having a laugh, and just enjoying themselves. However, fun is not funny, pun not intended. Fun looks more like this, looks more like concentration, absorption in the activity one is doing. And even though couch games, which are usually what we consider fun, do offer a context for that classical idea of fun to emerge, they still strive to reach and to provide the more deep and meaningful type of fun that we as designers try to achieve in all of our games. Fun is also accompanied, this type of fun, this type of focus and concentration is also accompanied by 2 other emotions, which are at the sides of it, which are boredom and frustration. And I think that this particular concept is very well explained in the flow theory by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who unfortunately left us in October 2021. And this is a pretty well-known theory, so I'm just gonna glide over it. It basically says that given the right conditions, subject, person, user, player can enter a mental state called the flow state. And it's characterized by complete involvement, complete enjoyment, by a sense of timelessness, and clear objectives and clear feedback on the performance one is doing. And it can be achieved in an incredibly large amount of fields, for example, sports, work, playing on instruments, and obviously, since we're here, while playing video games. In game design, we use it to design progression systems, level design, enemy design, combat design, you name it. Almost every branch of game design uses the flow theory in some way or another. And even though it can be easy for us to determine the skill of a player, like their reaction time, like their aim, their decision making, their strategy, and the challenge of the player. So those same characteristics of their opponent, or enemy's number, damage, attack speed, and hitboxes for action games, or the intelligence parameter of the AI in strategy games. It can be more difficult for us to define, not define, to quantify boredom and frustration. So let's take two situations an example. The first one, mindless grinding. Let's say I'm playing a RPG and there is a super weapon which is extremely powerful, and if I have it, I will receive eternal glory and honor from the community. However, it's dropped with a very low drop chance from a boss which is way below my level in a particular area of the game. So what I'm doing is just loading the area, kill the boss. If it doesn't drop, load again the area, kill the boss, and again and again and again until I finally drop this weapon. The second case is unfair matchmaking. So let's say I just downloaded a new first-person shooter game, and for whatever reason, maybe not enough players on the servers, maybe the game is old, so most of the players will already be very good at the game, or perhaps actual unfair matchmaking, I am put against players way above my skill level, and I get annihilated and end up lose and end up being frustrated. Those two situations have one thing in common, which is that the player is not learning. In the first case, because the outcome that I'm getting could not be any better given my skill. So I am already doing what I can do at the best of my capabilities as I'm steamrolling through the area, and so I'm not learning anything new. Whereas in the second case, there's so much information that I could learn that I just perceive it as noise, just like the first song in jazz. I know I could be aiming better. I know I shouldn't have turned the corner there. Hell, I probably don't even have the right loadout for the map. But in this moment, in this particular instance, I am perceiving all of this as noise and thus not learning everything. So, to sum up everything we said, games are something you play with rules and a goal. Chunking and grokking create hard-coded behaviors in our brain, and fun happens as those two processes happens for mechanics, dynamics, genres, whatever in a game. The fun lies between boredom and frustration, and it is a necessary ingredient to reach flow in games. To close up, I want to leave you with another quote from a famous game designer. I think you might have heard of Sid Meier, the designer of Civilization, and he says that games are a series of meaningful choices. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's very interesting, and I guess complicated, but wide topic, which I guess you can follow in many different ways. I wanted to ask, as it's a bit complicated and kind of hard to grasp quickly. Maybe you would have some advice, for example, connected to Game Jam. How could you quickly think of like the main things to connect to, thinking about the fun part of your game? Is it like mechanic? I loved like it in the beginning. You said that it's not only mechanic which matters, but also style and another thing I don't remember.
Aesthetics might be confused in this case, as yes, aesthetic is usually style and art. In that particular case, though, aesthetic is a way of identifying a type of fun. That article identifies 8 aesthetics that can be reached in games. which included the immersion, the challenge, and various others. For this exact topic, for this exact talk, the only way to provide fun is by giving the player something to learn constantly. So either they are doing something new or they are improving on a skill they already possess in some way or another.
Yeah, we've been talking about this thing that you're learning from the creating and gaining more skill. I mean, in these these hard games, like the roguelite games, it seems that this thing is becoming more, how to say, more popular in the sense that people appreciate this learning curve.
Yes, I also would say that in the last times, in the last period, we are seeing especially a lot of games who play a lot with the learning curve. Usually we are used to having a learning curve which is completely artificial and usually is a raising curve determined by the designer. However, in those last years, we saw the birth of roguelites and battle royales, both of which have a very funky learning curve in most of the instances of the genres. So yes, I would say that we are seeing some interesting stuff in the last years.
Maybe you could share, like, a couple of examples of like, not like large games, but something from smaller games, maybe from indie titles, which kind of stuck to you as a better examples of kind of engaging in this fun experience, providing this kind of fun style or mechanic.
Yes, actually. Well, any roguelike or roguelite have a very strange learning curve. I'm thinking of games like Dead Cells, in which, well, the learning, the difficulty goes up statically in the single run, but in the long term, this difficulty doesn't go up as the player gets better and better, but it just repeats itself. And so the difficulty is very high at start, and player has to have many attempts for actually reaching the end of the run, and then the game becomes easier. How the designer solved this problem was introducing the boss cells, so giving more difficulty to the early areas. So they basically shift the whole difficulty curve up a notch so that now the player is back at the starting point. Or I think doing games like Into the Breach, it's kind of a strange roguelike as it has more aspects of like a campaign-based strategy game, but there the difficulty again remains the same. Thing is that once you complete the campaign with the first set of mechs, then you unlock new other mechs, which doesn't necessarily make the games more difficult, but it gives you different tools and different strategies to think about, so you keep learning more and more stuff as you experience the game.
Yeah, I love this general idea of like chunking into like smaller pieces to try to understand. I think that that connects well with what we talked yesterday about kind of approaching game jam and like doing everything like in smaller pieces, not how to say, not to overburden yourself, not to think of something very large, just to have it like a disseminate in a smaller chunks, I guess, to kind of perfect, or like not maybe perfect, but create like these smaller parts, like working smaller parts, and then try to build on top of that. So I guess this concept that you talked would work well on this like approach, like smaller to larger, and not start from something like very large from the beginning.
Yes, actually, I think that the very first point of the talk about mechanics is very coherent in this conversation, as one can simply start from a single mechanic and give it the single rule, and then add on top of it hidden aspects that the player is supposed to find out later and later and later in the game. But when the game is born, the designers could simply focus on one single mechanic, trying to make that the most understandable and the most interesting possible. And then if they feel the need that later in the progression the player has mastered it too soon, they can then either introduce new mechanics or build on top of this single mechanic. And then when all of the mechanics are saw one together with the other, they create the dynamics which then make the game what it is. So yes, single pieces, single mechanics is definitely one of the best things to focus on when creating a game in a short time.
Okay, well, I guess yeah, we took almost like a lesson time, 40 minutes. So I guess yeah, thanks a lot. We'll share the recording. We'll share the recording everywhere. Hope more people can look at it and think about these ideas and get inspiration. Loved the list of the books. There are so many things written about game development and game design. So that's good to know.
The more one can dive deep into this, the better it is. Obviously, with not so much time at our disposal, it can be quite a pity to have to go into development without reading those books. But yes, they are for sure great resources for game designers.
Okay, so yeah, thanks Andrea again. Thanks for all who are joining live or later online, or viewing online. And we are coming back tomorrow for the session a bit later at 6:30, and it will be like about solo or team development topic from Arvidas Stoti. So yeah, see you, and thanks again.
See you.